Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. GaleForceWins, the podcast, is the result.
Good morning, Alan. How are you doing?
That's kind. And you?
Very good. I always say good morning, but I got to get used to the podcast because you could be watching this at any time of the day. So,
Jerry, this podcast will be timeless, my friend. There will be nothing to capture. So welcome to GaleForceWins. And we're excited to have our audience with us today. I want to take you on a little bit of a journey, and I want to start that journey down on the south coast of Newfoundland. Now, that's way down on the Burin Peninsula. For our guests don't know where that is, it looks like a little piece of land that looks like Italy that juts off the bottom of Newfoundland. We're going right down there today. We're going into an Econoline minivan. We're calling that a Foots taxi. That's your way out of this part of Newfoundland. And on top of that taxi, there's a roof rack where your luggage goes, and that roof rack is covered with fish netting to hold your luggage in place while you do that long drive to St. John's. Now you can just imagine sitting in the back of that Econoline van on your way into Newfoundland. Well, I can tell you, if that were me, well, Gord Downey would probably describe it best. I'd be all squint-eyed and confused coming out of the wilderness. But I can tell you our next guest wasn't that. Our next guest went on to be one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women and an officer of the Order of Military Merit. How do you get from there to there? We sure are happy to have our next guest join us. Michele Tessier will be on the show on GaleForceWins. Michele, real pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Alan and Jerry. It's really great to be here.
So, Michele, I want to put you in a place and time right now. I want to take you back 10 years from this exact moment. 10 years from this exact moment, or within a couple of days, you received a letter from your grandmother. Now, I know that your grandma just passed away at 91 years old recently, but you received a letter from your grandma, and I want to take you to the moment that you received that letter, what that letter meant to you, and what your grandma, what the message was. She mentioned in there about being smart, about having guts, about following footsteps. All of those things resonated with me when I read that letter. You tell me what it meant to you. Take us back 10 years, Michele.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, I had just taken command of HMCS Nanaimo, my first at-sea command, third woman in Canada to have command of a ship in the Canadian Navy. And I was a little surprised that I hadn't heard anything from my grandmother in the couple of months since I had taken command. And at Christmas, she sent me a letter with my Christmas gift. And my grandfather had passed away not long after I had joined the Navy, so he never got to see me accomplish the things that I did. But in the letter that she wrote me, she described to me what it was like for my grandfather, who was not well educated, went and started his journey at sea as a teenager, and how he had walked on board a fishing dragger, down on the south coast of Newfoundland in Grand Bank, and looked up at the captain and said, "One day that's going to be me." And my grandmother always talked about how she was very nervous every time he went to sea, how she worried about him, especially when there were storms and in the wintertime. And so, of course, she said, she was proud of me. She was proud of what I accomplished, and she was still very worried about me, and that she was always going to worry about me, and that there was no one that could make her not worry about me. But she told me she was proud of me, and that I was following in my grandfather's footsteps, and that my grandfather had always said it takes guts to go to sea. And that, for me, was a really, really special letter. In fact, I sat on my living room floor the morning that I read that and just cried, because it meant more to me than I think any gift I could have ever received.
Right. So it's clear, Michele, that you start your journey down there in Burin, standing on the shoulders of giants. This is your foundation from where you go to. Now that's beautiful story, and quite enjoyed that. Now let's get back into that Foots taxi. Okay, now you're on your way into St. John's. What are you thinking? Did you ever envision that you would have been as accomplished as you are today and have so much influence on young men and women of this country? Did you ever think that when you got in the back of that Foots taxi?
I hopped into that taxi to go to university in St. John's, and had always been interested in the military, but wasn't really sure if it was for me. I had even gone to the recruiting center at one point and talked to them and thought, maybe this isn't for me, and I'll just carry on to university. And then I met some people who were going through a program at the Marine Institute who were in the Navy, and realized what an opportunity it was. And it was one of those individuals who pointed me towards the Naval Reserve. And so I went down and thought, might as well just give it a try. What's the worst that could happen? And that was what started the journey. But, going there, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Both of my younger sisters had been in Sea Cadets. I had not. So I didn't even know the difference between an officer and a non-commissioned member. I knew nothing. And I got to cabin and I was learning, right from the grassroots all the way up. And, I can recall a few of the things that happened as I was going through my training. And one of them was Cabot, the unit that I joined at, which I believe both of you also joined at. We had a training week out in Victoria, BC. And I went out just to be sort of a spare hand because I was not qualified in my trade to be a watchkeeper on the bridge yet. And we did a night steam. And it was the first time I had been at sea at night. And I remember some of the sailors saying to me, what's wrong with you tonight, ma'am? You're awful quiet. You're usually very talkative. And I looked at one of them and said, I just realized that one of these days, that's supposed to be me up there on that bridge. I don't know what is going on out there. I see lights. I don't know what's a building, what's a ship, what's anything. And I thought, how am I ever going to be able to accomplish this? Here I am. I guess I accomplished it. The perseverance, the training through the military, and just taking the time and having the patience to do it. And here I am. I did it.
Wow, Michele, it's remarkable, that whole story of being at sea at night. I could tell you almost an identical story to another guy who had the same experience, and was curious if he could ever do it, if he could ever be the guy on the bridge. That guy is now the Admiral of the Navy, Art McDonald. I had the same conversation with him. So you're not alone in that whole, because it's daunting, right? That's a daunting thing to think about, right? You have lives in your hands. Well, you went on to command ships. I mean, you traveled the globe, Michele. You went from Africa to the Arctic, East and the Atlantic and the Pacific. You've touched everywhere. Tell us about that journey.
That again has been just one of the most phenomenal things about the job. As a teenager, if you'd looked at me and told me that one day I'd be eating sushi in Japan or, hugging a deaf child in Africa, nothing that I could have ever imagined before. But the privilege that this job has given me to do that kind of travel. And I would say, not like most sailors, fortunately for me, a lot of the time I've done it by airplane and not by ship. I was in the Middle East shortly after 9/11 happened. I was in Croatia. I've been in Norway. Like you said, I've been a whole bunch of places. Africa being one of those ones that really, really sticks out in my mind. And I did that about a year and a half ago for an exercise called Obangami Express. And I was sent over to be a commander for a zone during this exercise. And I was responsible for the training exercises for 6 West African countries. That in of itself was interesting because I was the only woman in the entire room. And the tendency for the other male officers from the African countries to sort of default to one of the men was always there. But, eventually they kind of caught on that actually I was the one that was in charge. But, you know, being in Accra, we were in Osu Castle. I was in the bedroom that Queen Elizabeth slept in. I sat on the same throne as she did. There's the royal flush I got to make in Accra, Ghana. I spent International Women's Day in Africa. I went to a school for deaf children. We did so many things. We had a tour of the castle, and this was one of the things that really sticks out in my mind, and it's one that stuck close to my heart, and that's they took us for a tour of the castle and down into the dungeons where there is what they call the door of no return, and those are in castles across Africa. It's where they took African people to sell them as slaves, and the door of no return is where folks walked out of for the last time to never ever see their home country again. And the conditions in the dungeons, the conditions on board those ships, to be there in that dark dungeon with no air circulation, no light, no anything, and then walk through that door the way that so many people have, and experience it and understand it for yourself, exactly how horrible people can be to each other and how much work we still have left to do in this world. That was one of the best experiences, I would think, of my career. And I'm so thankful I had the opportunity to go to Africa.
Wow. Jerry, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's I'm just listening in awe, actually, Michele, of what your career has been. I just want to circle back to the description of night sailing. Three of us have experience in the Navy. When you finally took command, and I don't think you mentioned that, can you just describe a little bit about what that was like? And can you remember the very first time you were actually in charge on the bridge?
Oh boy, can I ever! You know, this was another one of those holy crap kind of moments, because I took command on somewhat short notice. We had someone that was going to be leaving. They needed another commanding officer, and my boss came to me and said, "Hey, we really want you to take command of Nanaimo." And at the time, I remember sort of thinking, I don't know if I'm ready for this. But you know, I thought, well, I'm command qualified. Somebody believes in me. Here I go. And whenever I look at the picture of me taking command of Nanaimo, where they sit down, the two COs, the incoming and the outgoing, and then the reviewing officer in the middle, and we go to sign the certificates, and the photographer says, "Okay, everyone look at the camera." And I looked up, and at that moment, I thought to myself, holy crap, what am I doing? I'm signing for a ship. I'm not ready for this. This is insane. They're going to give me a ship? This is crazy. And so that was that really, you know, holy crap moment. Taking the ship to sea within a couple of days of that, you know, I don't think you ever forget the first day that you take a ship to sea. That one I remember, but the bigger one was really the first time that we left to go out for, you know, overnight. We had done a couple of day sails for trials and things, and then we headed out on an exercise.
Which port are you in at this point?
We're in Esquimalt in Victoria,
Okay.
BC.
Yeah, I know it well.
Yes, and we were heading out to do an exercise, and we were supposed to go out on the west coast of the island. And I had been watching the weather, and I knew that it was not going to be pleasant. It was October, and we headed out, and the staff for the exercise called us up and told us they wanted us to proceed out into Nootka Sound and go to anchor there for the night. And that meant that we were going to get there at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And as we're making the turn to go into Nootka Sound, I'm beamed to the sea. It's about 40 knots of wind. The ship is rolling. And all I can think is, I have not been to sea with this crew at night before. I don't really know what they're capable of. And it's been a while since I have been at sea. And here we go. We got to go in. Everybody's looking at me. They're all expecting me to pull this off. And that night was another one of those, you know, where you start to second guess yourself. Holy crap, what am I really doing here? And then you realize, no, I've been trained to do this. I know how to do this. And really, I think when the proverbial poo hits the fan, that's when you realize that you have the training that you need to do it. And when everybody's looking at you to be the leader for them, you can do it.
It's that little bit of that feeling of uncertainty, that healthy kind of nervousness. I think it is, right. I think everybody experiences that, even if they're really good at something, right. And I think it's a good thing to have that. It's kind of like a little check. Make sure you're not taking yourself all that serious, right. And so on that note, Michele, there's so much more complexity to you. I mean, you're an accomplished naval commander. Clearly, the Navy has entrusted you with yet another command, and we can talk a little bit about where we're going with that later. But the Navy has entrusted you with, one of its most precious platforms, and so clearly you're an accomplished naval commander. It goes without saying. But there's so much more to Michele Tessier than the Navy. You have a genuine love for nature. You have a love for animals. You're passionate about theater and yoga and all of these things, the complexity that makes you who you are. Tell us a little bit about your other passions, because clearly we know you're good at the Navy.
It's for a while, honestly, in the Navy, I had kind of lost some of that stuff. You become very focused on your training and then on your career progression. And I found that I had not taken the time for myself to do a lot of those things that I really enjoyed doing. I danced as a kid. I wasn't great, but I really enjoyed it. And as an adult, I started, okay, well, maybe I can get into a little bit of dance again. I can meet some people outside of the Navy. I can reinvigorate that part of me that likes to meet new people and try new things and have good experiences. And, that was the first step, I think, in sort of reclaiming a bit of myself from the Navy. Ironically, it was a posting to Thunder Bay, of all places, which was where I found yoga. And whenever I talk about the fact that I lived in Thunder Bay for a couple of years, the first thing that people say is, oh yeah, I was in Thunder Bay for a night when I was driving across the country. and most people say, and one night was enough. But I'm telling you, Thunder Bay was an amazing place to live. And it was the right time of my life to do it. I had been in a long-term relationship that had ended amicably, but it was time to go my own way. And I decided that, when an offer came to me to take command of a Naval Reserve Division in Thunder Bay, that I would go and do that. And I say Thunder Bay saved my life. I happened to rent an apartment above a yoga studio that had just opened, and I hadn't really done yoga before. And this is going to sound really crunchy and granola and tree huggy, but it made such a difference. I started doing yoga because there weren't really dance lessons that I could take there. And I was expecting the physical benefits of it, but I wasn't expecting the way that it affected me mentally and psychologically. I think it really changed a lot of things for me. I was able to be more calm, to deal with stress and things much better than I ever had. And it was just honestly life-changing. One of the things that I have enjoyed more than probably anything that I've done in my life, because it just takes you somewhere completely different. Wow. And when you look at a person in the Navy and the type of jobs that we do and the type of personalities that we tend to have, and then you look at something like yoga, and I know it's a bit of a dichotomy, but it's so nice to kind of bring that yin and yang of my personality together that way. That's been a really wonderful thing. And that same posting to Thunder Bay was a place where I decided, hearing people say negative things about the community and thinking to myself, I can go there and I can be miserable, or I can go there and I can get out and get involved in things and see everything that's there, because I'm only going to be here for a couple of years, and then the opportunity is going to be gone. I can make the most of it, or I can be miserable. And that was what I did. I went out, I went hiking, I went dog sledding, snowboarding, whatever I could do to get out, learn how to acclimatize and enjoy those minus 35 degree temperatures that they have there. But just a beautiful, amazing place, wonderful people. I made so many good friends there, and a great theater program there too. So it was fantastic.
Tell us about the theater program. Go. I'm
Well,
sorry.
before you do, I just going to say, it reminds me. My sister-in-law lives in Brandon, Manitoba, and we've holidayed in Winnipeg many times. And I remember the first time I told people, "Oh yeah, well, people, oh, what are you doing for the summer? I'm going to Winnipeg for a week and a half." What? Winterpeg? One of the most incredible holidays we've ever had. Just absolutely beautiful. So that was conjuring up that in my head. But anyway, yeah, Alan asked about the theater.
Take us down that path. Take us down that. You're right, Michelle. Thunder Bay is absolutely spectacular, and the people from Thunder Bay are absolutely spectacular. And just standing in Thunder Bay and looking out at the sleeping giant, and I don't know, everything about Thunder Bay there's something romantic about it. Yet it gets this bad rap. Take us to the theater. Let's go in there for a moment.
Sure. That was something I started in high school. Again, just, an extracurricular. I was one of those kids that always wanted to be involved in everything. If there was something to join or to try, I wanted to be a part of it. And something we didn't talk about before, but when I was a young child, actually at the age of 5, I had surgery for hip dysplasia. Basically they went in, cut my thighs open, put some plates in there, screwed them into my hips, and I was in a body cast for about 8 months. And at 5 years old, I learned how to walk again for the second time. So I spent a lot of time in a body cast, not being able to do things. And when I reflect on that, I think that that's one of the reasons why I've been that person who just wants to try everything, because I spent so much time watching other people do things that I couldn't do. So theater was just another one of those things that I wanted to go and give it a try. And I did in high school. And then again, and I should say I did some of it in university as well. In fact, my degree from Memorial is a Bachelor of Arts in English with a concentration in theater and drama, which means, I make the perfect Mars officer in the Navy.
I was just going to say, set you up perfectly for command of a warship.
Exactly, yes. But then, you leave university, and I went off to the Navy, and I lost a bit of that as well. And it was those dance classes in Victoria that brought me back to theater. My dance teacher was doing the choreography for a fundraiser for a local community theater group. It's a youth theater group. And believe it or not, they were doing Rocky Horror. And she said, "Michelle, you should come and audition." And I honestly, I drove to the audition, and I sat inside in my Jeep. I'm going in, I'm not going in. I'm going in, I'm not going in. And eventually I did. I went in, and I ended up in the chorus for that. But it, again, was one of those things that just reinvigorated a part of me that I had lost. And it was so refreshing to, again, meet new people, to be up on a stage. So I got involved that way. I did some things on stage. I did some stage management with ironically a couple of other women who were also in the Navy. And so when I went to Thunder Bay, it was sort of a natural progression to kind of go and seek that out, because it was a community that, even though I wouldn't know the people, that I would feel a little bit comfortable. And so within the first week or so of me moving to Thunder Bay, I found a small group called Cambrian Players. They were about to do a show called The War Show, and the auditions were just happening. So I went in and said, "Hey, if you want help backstage or with costumes or whatever, I'll do whatever. I just want to get involved." And then they said, they made a comment about, "Well, we see on your application that you said that there might be times that you would be away and miss rehearsals for work. So what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm in the Navy, and I'm the commanding officer of the Naval Reserve Division here." Well, the next thing you know, I'm teaching actors how to do drill for a play about World War II.
Wow. It speaks to your desire. Just let's give it a try. And your humility, not wanting to take center stage, but hey, I'm willing to go in the back and help out in any way I can. That's fascinating. Michelle, I think we've gone south now. We came from Africa. We started in the east, touched on the north, or Thunder Bay anyway. We could go further in the Arctic, because I know that you've got a lot of experience up there. But I want to go west now, because I know that you've got a real passion for the west coast of Canada. and it's a beautiful place. There's no doubt. It's hard not to touch the west coast of our country and not long to get back there. So tell us a little bit about your passion for Canada's west coast.
Oh boy, I don't know what to say other than that I'm an island girl. You know, I grew up on the island on the East Coast. I spent basically my adult life on the island on the West Coast, and there's just something about that for me that is home. You know, I refer to both Newfoundland and Vancouver Island as home. And you know, as an adult, when you spend 20 years of your life in a place, it's hard to say that you don't want to go back to the East Coast home. But there is just something about that place that I can't even describe. I mean, every time I see the mountains, it takes my breath away. There is not one time that I have crested a hill and those mountains have come into view that I haven't just thought, oh my God, what an amazing place to live and how privileged am I? And, you know, it's probably in the last few years that I lived in Victoria, and I've now been in Halifax for just over 2 years. But the last few years that I lived in Victoria, I really started to explore the place. Because prior to that, all of what I had seen of Victoria or of Vancouver Island and of British Columbia was from the sea.
Yeah.
We, in a Kingston-class ship, which is a smaller coastal defense patrol vessel, we can get into a lot of the little inlets that some of the bigger ships can't.
And that's a really nice way to see the West Coast as well. But
absolutely, it is. But it's hilarious because I remember, you know, well, my partner, who I've been with now for a few years, but at one point him saying to me something about Tofino, and I said, well, I've actually never been to Tofino. I've sailed past it a whole bunch of times, so I've actually never been there.
Yeah.
And this was just before I was moving to Thunder Bay, and he said, well, we have to go to Tofino. You can't not see Tofino. So, you know, it was, I think, seeing all those places from the sea, which, yes, absolutely unbelievable, that then showed me that, you know, to go and see it from the other side is also important as well. So a little bit of driving to get into a place, but I mean, you know, the Tofino-Ucluelet area, Port Renfrew is just, and you know, the old growth forests, the ocean itself. I mean, I think that my happy place would be in a cabin in those big trees with a 2-minute walk to the ocean, and there it is. I can die happy right there.
Yeah.
Michelle, oh my, I agree with you. Sorry, Alan. You conjure up memories for me, and you know, renewing my relationship with Alan brings me back 30 years. But my very first experience with the Navy was being on a plane to Victoria. I guess I was 17, maybe 18, I can't remember. A gentleman sitting next to me was a naval officer, and I was starting to pepper him with questions. But one thing he said to me that I'll never forget, this is in March, so we're getting ready to go out and spend a summer in the reserves. And he said, yeah, I can't wait to get home to my home in Victoria and mow the lawn. And I swear to God, I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's March. What do you mean mow the lawn? He looked at me and he goes, I mow the lawn throughout the year. It blew my mind that the country was so diverse that grass would grow in a place in the winter, so-called winter. Anyway, I ended up going on and doing a geography degree because of that conversation. So the West Coast had an indelible mark on my life.
So you guys are both very romantic. I remember my first trip out west, and I was 17 years old, and I was on a government airplane, and the guy sitting next to me was a petty officer, and he was smoking because you could smoke on a plane back then, and I was in my white uniform, and he was dropping ashes all over my leg. That's what I remember. Okay? Okay.
How did that affect you, Alan? How did that change your life?
The west coast of Canada is beautiful, and I can tell you, Michelle, that, and you know it, and Jerry knows it, the people in Tofino and the people in Victoria are no different than the people in Grand Bank, people in St. John's and Halifax. They're all Canadian, and it's lovely to be there. Michelle, I want to take you now to the future, and it's clear that we can sense your passion and everything that you touch, and the people that you touch are lucky to have the experience to be with you. what's the future look like for you? I know that you've made some big decisions, huge decisions actually, and tell us what the future looks like for Michele Tessier.
Now that's a hard one to answer. I did just recently make a very big decision, and that is I'll be coming up on my 25 years of service next fall, and I decided that was the time to retire from the Navy and start looking to do something else. A big part of that decision has to do with my health. I'm clearly not getting any younger, and the number of minor injuries that I've had over the years, and I guess my attitude has always been, yep, no, I got to get to sea. So just give me the painkillers and I got, but I have a few issues with lower back, with my cervical spine, with my shoulder and so on. And it's getting harder. It's harder to maintain that, and going to sea I know is going to be difficult. And I'm looking at the potential for the military to kind of say, okay, yeah, you're broken enough that it's probably time for you to retire. So I just thought it was the right time to make a decision on my terms, and to do it early enough so that the Navy was set up for success. Because the hardest part of leaving the Navy, honestly, is leaving the people. The people that work for you and that you work with are phenomenal. I mean, I can't say enough good about every crew that I've ever had, and this one is no different. They're motivated, just exceptional people with great attitudes, and we have a lot of fun in the shore office from 6 feet apart. But to say goodbye to those folks is the hard thing. And right now, in the situation that we're in, the hardest part of that was I couldn't even muster the ship's company together to tell them in person. So I had to tell them by an email. And since then, a number of them have come and spoken to me about how they said, they were sorry to see me go. And I am sad to leave the people, but I also want to make sure that the ship is set up for success, and that those people are set up for success. And if I had not had command at sea before, and this not have been my 4th command appointment, I might feel differently about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm good with the decision that I've made. I'm at peace with that. It's okay for it to be time to go, and it's okay to move on to other things. What those other things are going to be, yet to be determined. I'm in the process of looking at what maybe I want to do in my future. Certainly, one of the things that I have always enjoyed doing is talking to groups of people. Alan, you yourself had me out to UPEI a few years ago to do a couple of presentations. And I've enjoyed talking to, not just groups of women, but, anyone that'll listen to me really. And also in particular, young people. I'm really just about encouraging people to go for it. That whole thing we talked about at the beginning with, the just give it a try, that's been my motto, my reason for being, I guess, is you never know if you don't give it a try. And, if you don't succeed in it, that's okay. Then maybe that wasn't for you. But if you don't try it, you're never going to know. So if you find something that you're passionate about and something that you're half decent at, and you go after that, then you can accomplish anything. And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, whatever. It's the opportunities are there for everyone. And when I look at some of the things that I have done that I would never have thought that I would be where I am today, it's all just from giving it a try. So that piece of, I guess, the motivational speaking or just encouraging people to get out there and try things is something that I would really like to do. How much money I can make at that, I don't know. Maybe I'll need another job. but that's, I think, sort of where I am now. And I only say that because so many people have seemed to enjoy listening to me. I tend to get positive feedback on some of the things that I say. And my approach has always been to just be myself, be positive about things, and try and put that out there. Put more good out there than there is bad.
Yeah. Jerry, what do you think of that whole redefining yourself and the journey that you and I are on even?
Well, Michele, it's interesting how many people like ourselves are in the same boat. I mean, I spent 24 years working for a newspaper. If you want challenge, I assure you that is an industry that is under enormous challenges. For 5 years was envisioning in my head what the next step was. I couldn't figure it out, but I know one thing: I had to pull the plug, and I pulled the plug myself. It's been quite an interesting journey, and this relationship I've rekindled and reinvigorated with Alan is exciting, because I never, you don't know. Alan said something to me, and I got to say this. He said, Jerry, it's sometimes people spend too much time tuning the guitar and never start the gig. Well, that's kind of why GaleForceWins is happening. We don't have this all mapped out. We don't know where this is going to take us. We do know one thing, that we're similar to you. We love talking to people, and I think your story, Michele, is interesting. I have a question for you, based on what you've said. I've taken notes, because that's the kind of guy I am. Despite the fact I've worked 20 years in a digital, my job was to reinvigorate the newspaper through digital, but I still like pen and paper. Leadership takes sacrifice. I hear you say things like reinvigorating, reclaiming myself. At one point, I was responsible for 27 people. I'm kind of happy I don't no longer have that responsibility. Been there, done that, but it takes enormous sacrifice and focus. What do you think? It's interesting that you're reinventing yourself. You haven't lost yourself, but I do think some people look to leaders to have all the answers, and it can be lonely at the top. So I just want you to talk a little bit more about the sacrifice and where you think, that has benefited you now that you're back into things like yoga and dance and theater.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess the sacrifice part of it, when you take on a role as a leader, that I think you have to accept and appreciate and understand the fact that you are the person that everyone else is going to turn to. And so, yes, I can have my own issues and my own problems, but the people that work for me also have a lot of issues and a lot of problems and other things going on in their lives. And what they need to know is that not only do they have leadership there that supports them in it, but that also understands and goes through the same things. So, in a number of cases, when I've sat down and talked one-on-one with members of my ship's company, or others that have worked with me, it's just explaining to them how I understand the struggles that you're going through. I may not be able to fully relate to your situation, but we've all been affected by things in very similar ways. I mean, even just here now with during the pandemic, I had one of our sailors who, his grandmother passed away. It was the same day that my grandmother passed away. And, that's, life happens. But people need to know and understand that you're leading from a place of compassion. So, there's a place as a leader to be firm about things and to enforce rules and so on, but that's not 100% of the time. There's a lot of space, I believe, in this. And I think the Navy has, and the military writ large, has changed a lot over the years, from the days probably when you both joined, and even from when I joined, where the attitude was much more strict, and we are basically robots and we don't have emotions and we just do things and we get on with it. Now there's more room for compassion, I think, in our military, and so there's not excuses for poor behavior or bad things that require discipline, but the understanding of folks and the things that they're going through is just so important. And that's part of, I like to think, what has made me as successful a leader as I have been, or as people tell me that I have been, is that I'm not afraid to have those kinds of conversations with people, and I'm not afraid to be a little bit vulnerable myself and explain that I've felt the way that you've felt. I've been through some of the same things you have, or I know people that have been through the same things, and here's how we're going to help you get through that particular challenge. So, those sacrifices come from thinking about the other person before yourself. That doesn't mean that you don't look after yourself, though. And there are times certainly where I have felt that was what I had done, was ignored myself.
Well, yeah, and just I got to touch on this, the vulnerability piece. And I am like you. I showed my vulnerability, but I will tell you, as a leader, I often question that, because every time I showed my vulnerability, there was always someone who then saw that as an opening to challenge my leadership. And I can tell you that what people don't realize as leaders, we're still human as well. We're evolving. We're trying to be the best we can be. And Michele, found that as a leader, the hardest part. I knew I had to show compassion, but those individuals that took advantage of that made it very difficult as a leader. And I don't know if you encountered that. And I can tell you, just thinking about how challenging it must have been, because you said you took command and you're only the third woman. I've encountered men who just don't get it. I grew up with a mom who was 43 and she was a widow. I was given an enormous opportunity and advantage to see how powerful a woman can be. When I encounter men around me that don't see that, it drives me crazy. So if you just touch on that a little bit.
Sure. I often talk to people about the fact that growing up in Outport, Newfoundland, it was a family of 3 daughters. There were no boys in our household. And as I say, there were no pink jobs or blue jobs in the house. There were just jobs that had to be done, and we did them. So I guess, never being discouraged from trying things, doing things, whatever it was, playing sports or doing dance or whatever. Our parents never told us we couldn't do something because of our gender, or, this was not the place for you to do this. And I think, I drew a lot from both my parents and my grandparents in terms of their leadership and wanting to be a person who was involved that way and who sort of took charge of things. I've certainly experienced from time to time, there are people that might exactly challenge my my leadership or my abilities as a woman, or, as you said, find those little places to kind of see if they can take advantage of it or make you question your own abilities. It's happened, but I've never let it be the thing that defines me. I would rather just be me, lead the way that I lead. And if other people don't like it, then, I guess that's too bad for them. I've certainly been in situations where, I've made the recommendation and, the civilian male who works for whatever organization that's supporting us says, no, we're not going to do it that way. And then a male counterpart of mine gives the exact same plan. And then he says, yeah, we're going to do that. And, my response was always, well, don't ask me. I'm just a girl, But no, it's being true to yourself. It really is. And I think about when I challenged the command board, and that being one of the more difficult things I've ever done in my life. And rarely does a person pass it on the first go. I think, as we always say, there are 2 types of people in the world: those who challenge several command boards, and then the jerks who pass it on the first try.
Just briefly, for someone who's not in the military, could you explain a command board and then make your point, if you don't mind?
Sure, yeah. And in fact, they've actually just switched how we're doing command qualifications in the Navy to a different format. But the way that it was when I went through is there were a series of exams that you had to write and pass that were sort of Navy-wide exams. And when you passed all of those exams, you were what they called Part 1 qualified, and then you challenged a board. And the board is literally, you go in, you sit down in front of a panel of commanding officers, senior to you, experienced, and they throw everything at you. They will ask you questions about anything and everything.
It's not intimidating at all, right?
Not at all. No, not at all. You'll go into a simulator. You'll have to deal with, what we call rules of the road or collision avoidance scenarios. You have to drive the ship alongside. And they are analyzing absolutely every decision that you make. And I did the board a few times before I was successful. And I found that to be so stressful. I would I couldn't even eat before a board. I used to have to tell the board secretary, you come out looking for me to come into the room and I'm not here. I'm in the heads, in the washroom. I'll be back in a minute. Because I was so nervous that I just, I was one of the most stressful things I'd probably ever done in my life. And I got to a point where I decided that I was going to do the board one more time. And if I wasn't successful, then that was okay. I could live with it. But I needed to go in there and I needed to do it my way. I needed to be me. I had to stop getting inside my head and trying to be the person that I thought they wanted me to be, trying to answer the questions that I thought the way they wanted me to answer them. And instead just answer the questions and take the action the way that I felt was best and the way that I would do it. And I joke about it because when you talk to other people in my trade, which as we were called Mars officers once upon a time, we're now called naval warfare officers. And I say, I know it sounds cliche but something about that board just clicked. And I don't know if it was because I had resolved that whether I was going to pass or fail, that it was the last board I was ever going to do and that I was going to be okay with that. But I went into that board and something was just different. I went in there and I was the captain of the ship. And at one point, I even forgot that the other board members were in the room with me watching me. At one point, I turned around to see what one of the ships that I had ordered to do something was doing. And one of the senior officers was standing in my way. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, could you move, please? Because he was blocking my view. And something about that was just different. And I like to say it was, or I like to think, I guess, that it was just letting go of all of that other stuff and just being true to myself.
Now, on that note, let's get you back to the future. So you described how you're a little bit uncertain where the future is going to go. Are you nervous about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course I am.
Okay, now let me stop you before you expand on that. It's fascinating for Jerry and I, and indeed for the guests that listen to this, to think that you could be nervous about that. To think of everything that you've accomplished from the outside looking in, you just have to point your finger in a direction you want to go and you'll be successful, right? But it's that nervousness that you have that's going to make you even more successful because you know that you're going to try something different and you're going to put yourself out there. And right back to the point on vulnerability, you know what it feels like to be vulnerable. And vulnerability, even though you open yourself up and somebody might take a shot at you, it's better to be vulnerable and open yourself up and let them take a shot at you and move on. I think it's fascinating. So your future, you're nervous about it. You shouldn't be, but it's a good thing that you are. Where's it going to be? East or west? The big question.
It will be back out west.
Okay.
I have a home out there. I still own a house out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Atlantic Canada is very sad to have lost Michele Tessier, but we do know that the roots that you have come from will find their way out there. And you're right. And as we talked about, east-west, Canada is Canada. People around the globe are virtually the same. Everybody is kind of the same. I think it's fascinating. Jerry, if you had the choice right now, would you head out west?
I'm telling you, like, I don't want to be too nostalgic, but I mean, I remember as Michele, as you're talking, I used to rent a moped. Alan, I don't know if you remember those mopeds that you could rent downtown Victoria?
No one ever admits to renting a moped, Jerry.
Well, I tell you, I remember being by myself, Michele, and I'd just hit the road and I'd be flying, I don't know, what was it, like 40 cc's? You could go a maximum of 25 kilometers an hour. I drove to, I think I went to Nanaimo on it one time. I don't know, it took like an entire Saturday. But I remember driving that around and looking at the houses in like Saanich, if I remember, and all that. I can see why you fell in love with that place. Another story comes to mind. So we're on the Yags, they were called. I was an officer cadet. So, Michele, you remember an officer cadet is the lowest of the low in the Navy. But my job was to take the garbage off the boat, the thing I had to do was I was the first one off once she was tied on. I'll never forget it. I think we're in either Friday Harbor or Anacortes. I can't remember what place we were in, but this gentleman comes up to me. Now, picture this, west coast of Canada, and says, "Any newfs on board?" I'm 17, 18, whatever it is. And yes, you're talking to one. Anyway, it turns out he was from Stephenville. He knew a bunch of people that I know. That has happened multiple times on the West Coast. But I guess, you know, the West, I can see it, Alan. Look, I love Atlantic Canada. It's incredible. But the West Coast is gnawing at the back of my head. Like it's there, sure. And, you know.
So maybe Michele had it right. We're islanders at heart, and an island is an island, no matter how you cut it. So Michele, here we are. We're nearing the end of this conversation, and it's been fascinating. And thank you very much for joining us on it. Now let's get back in Foot's taxi. And what would you now say to that person sitting in Foot's taxi on their way into St. John's? What would you say to the audience? What's your one piece of advice? That you've had a wonderful journey, an incredible career inside and outside of the military. What would you tell? What's your one piece of advice to leave us with?
I have to comment on the Foot's taxi piece before I say that the piece of advice is, and that's only because I was on Foot's taxi just in March. Right as the pandemic started, I was at home visiting my parents, and I was taking Foot's taxi back into St. John's. So, you know, I've still taken that taxi.
We're not sponsored by Foot's Taxi, by the way. There's no affiliation with any company yet.
What's the advice, Michele?
The advice for that young girl on that taxi is to be happy. You know, that's been the number one thing I think that I've had to learn and relearn as I've gone through this journey, and that's that being yourself and being happy is the most important thing. I tell people all the time, you really can't be an effective leader if you're not happy. You know, you can have a job and you can make all the money in the world, but if you're working 20 hours a day and you're miserable while you're doing it, then what's the point? You know, there has to be enjoyment to life, and finding things that make you happy and doing jobs that make you happy are part of that. And when you get to that point where the job doesn't make you happy anymore, then you really have to look at yourself and decide if it's time to move on to do something else. And, you know, along with that, when you talk about being happy, it's remembering all those other pieces of you, that, you know, you're not just a job. You are an individual who has other interests and other things that you can do, that you want to do, that you do. And you have to continue to give yourself the space for that as well, because that is what brings it all back in. Happy in a job, happy in the rest of your life, and being happy. I'll finish it with a bit of a yoga piece, and that's that there's a documentary on Netflix which is called On Yoga. I think it's the Architect of Peace, something like that. And I had watched it a little while ago. I think actually I was on a plane a couple of years ago, the first time that I saw it. And they're talking to this one guru, and he's talking about how yoga is not just, you know, 45 minutes on a mat bending over. You know, there's more to yoga than just that. And then he goes on to say, and I'm absolutely paraphrasing him, but he goes on to say that, you know, you can't look at life as maybe, you know, 2 years from now I'll be happy. Maybe when this happens, I'll be happy. Down the road in my future, I'll be happy. You have to be happy now. Now is the time. Being happy all the time with what's going on. And, you know, in terms of a global pandemic, that, again, one of those lessons that I've had to repeat to myself, which is you can focus on all the negative, and the more you focus on negative things, the more that everything seems to be negative. The more difficult it will be to find anything good. If you focus on the good that's out there, then life becomes a whole lot more enjoyable.
Jerry, your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm just feeling happy by being able to talk to you, Michele. I can't help but reflect on my own career, lots of senior leadership roles, passionate about my work. But there were times where, even though I absolutely loved the work I was doing, when you're working 20 hours a day, 6 days a week, good God, it's hard to be happy sometimes. And, yes, the money's taking care of itself, all of that. But if you're not there for the people around you, is that really happiness? So I love it. To that young girl in Foot's Taxi, be happy, but be happy now. Wow. Yeah. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining GaleForceWins. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to Michele Tessier today, an accomplished military commander, has inspired and motivated young men and women around this globe, on the ocean and on shore, now on the second part, third part, fourth part of the journey, however you want to describe it, and heading out to the west coast of Canada, and they are lucky to have her. It's been a real pleasure to have Michele Tessier on the show today, and I can leave the audience with just one thing. The world needs more Michele Tessier. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.